Hello everyone, my name is Jennifer Maker. Today I want to teach you how to cut and put together this beautiful 3D paper lantern with two sweet birds. And if you like the idea of this lantern but wish you could change the design inside, I have a way to do that too. Stay tuned to the end for details. So I want to invite you to sit back and watch how to create this awesome lantern, and then make sure you have the right stuff to make your own. Then when you're ready, just replay this video and go step by step with me, pausing when you need to. Now, my motivation for this project was to create a lantern with a shadow box feel that didn't require like an actual shadow box frame. So I created a design with several detailed layers that slot into simple side supports. Then the whole lantern goes right into the base, which I promise is way easier to assemble than you might think. It's also really sturdy. It's truly amazing what you can do with some cardstock and glue. And the detailed cuts might look difficult, but that's where the Cricut cutting machine helps us out. I'll show you how to get perfect cuts for the layers and the frame pieces with a fun trick to try. It really all starts with high quality cardstock because that's the star of this lantern. I used the 65-pound white cardstock in my material list for the layers, the frame, and the base. Everything but the front decoration and the optional color for the birds. But really, I like it in just plain white too. Getting clean cuts can be a challenge when you're learning how to do Cricut paper crafts, and that's because there's a lot of variables that go into it. The design is a big part of it, so I've made sure that the SVG has smooth shapes that won't give your machine trouble. The material setting controls how hard the machine presses the fine point blade down into the cuts, as well as its speed and whether it uses one pass or does multiple passes to complete the cuts. I'll show you the settings that work best for me, but just note that all machines are not the same, so it's a really good idea to make a test cut first, just in case you need to adjust the pressure for your machine. Now, the biggest variable is the paper, or in this case, cardstock. There are so many different kinds of cardstock available, and it can be pretty daunting, I know, but here's how I picked my cardstock. First, I knew I wanted the glow of the lights in the back to be visible, but I didn't want the wires to show. So that means a solid paper to block the shapes, but a very light color to allow the light through the multiple layers. So white cardstock it is. Then I knew the layers would need to be sturdy enough to hold their flat shape, but take creases well to make the folded base. Light cardstock is a little too flimsy for the structure, but a really heavy type might be difficult to crease nicely. Plus, the thicker paper would block more of the light. So medium weight or 65 to 80-pound cardstock was my first choice, and it worked out really well. But that's not all. You also want a high quality cardstock once you've picked a color and weight. Better quality cardstock is made with longer, more uniform fibers, so they cut instead of tear when the blade goes through them. The 65-pound white cardstock in my materials list for the main pieces cut beautifully, especially if you use my trick for reinforcing intricate cuts using adhesive vinyl. And even with the best paper and the perfect settings, some really detailed designs can still tear when cutting tight corners or even when you're taking them off the machine mat, which is really upsetting for all of us. So I'll show you how to reinforce the cardstock with some simple, clear adhesive vinyl. It doesn't interfere with the lights, and it really helps support the paper. This is optional, but it makes a big difference if you're not super confident with Cricut intricate cuts yet. I did want to add a little color and sparkle, so I cut the front detail and some optional bird silhouettes from red glitter cardstock. The paper does use a different setting, so watch carefully when we get to that part in the video. Now, I used my Cricut Maker 3 to cut the materials, but the original Maker, Explorer Air 2, Explorer 3, Venture, and even the Joy Extra will cut everything out with no problems. The cuts are pretty intricate, so if you shrink it to fit on an original Cricut Joy, it might be too intricate, so I don't really recommend that. Now, I used my trusty green standard grip machine mat for all the cardstock, but I started with a fresh and sticky one for this project because that's important. A sticky mat keeps your cardstock perfectly in place for the Cricut to work at its peak efficiency, so it's less likely to tear the paper. While most of the assembly uses tabs, you will need some glue for the base and adding the details. And I'll show you why Barely Art's Precision Craft Glue is my favorite for adhering tiny tabs and getting a super secure result. Then we'll use one of my favorite combinations, clear glue dots and fairy lights, to finish assembling and lighting it all up. Remember to check out my tools and materials list for details on everything, including links on where to get them reliably. So let me show you where to get the free design files for our lantern, and then we'll get started in Cricut Design Space. Step 1, get my free designs. First, download my designs at jennifermaker.com/722. You can either save the project straight from that link or check out my entire free design collection. To find it, just look for libraries in the red bar at the top of my site. If you don't have a password yet, click Get a Password, and if you do have a password, click Enter the library. Then search for design number 722 and download it from there. If you're not sure how to do any of this, head to jennifermaker.com/svgs for a quick guide on how to download and unzip files. The folder has SVG and DXF files that you can cut with a cutting machine. There's also a PDF that you can cut by hand should you need that. I'll show you how to prepare the SVG in Cricut Design Space in this video. I'm using the Cricut Maker 3, but you can also use any cutting machine that can cut 8.5 by 11-inch cardstock. Inside the SVG folder, you'll see there are two versions of the design. One with score lines that you can cut using a scoring tool, and one with dash cut lines that only needs the fine point blade. The scored version has the word score in the file name, and the dash cut line version has the word no score in the file name. I'll show you how to make the version with dash cut lines because I personally find it easier to assemble. But if you'd like to try the score version and you're not sure how to set scoring lines, just follow my tutorial at jennifermaker.com/cricut-scoring. You can use the steps to adjust the score lines as needed too. When you've got your file downloaded and chosen, go to Cricut Design Space and upload your chosen file. Step 2, prepare your design. Here's how my file looks on the canvas in Cricut Design Space. You can zoom out to see all of it by clicking the minus sign. The main design on top has 7 layers. I've used red and different shades of gray to tell them apart, but you can cut everything in white or any light colors that will let the light shine through. I'm going to cut the optional bird silhouettes and the front frame in red glitter cardstock for some added sparkle. Below the design are the 5 pieces that create the base and frame structure. Since the design is so intricate, I don't recommend reducing the size of the file. Remember, we're going to add some vinyl to help with the intricate layers, but we don't need to change anything on the canvas. And you are ready to cut. Make sure the correct machine is selected and then click Make. Step 3, apply vinyl to the back of your cardstock. Cutting the intricate layers 3, 4, 5, and 6 on plain cardstock can be difficult. The tiny cuts can snag or not cut correctly depending on your machine, cardstock, and many other variables. But I have a secret weapon, permanent vinyl. It will make the cardstock sturdy enough for all of these little details without impacting the final look. Without it, my test pieces sometimes tore when I took them off the mats or during assembly, so I found this very useful. I'm using clear vinyl, which doesn't interfere with the lights at all. Now before cutting it to size, flip over your vinyl. Did you know that each square on the backing is a 1/2 inch? You can use all those squares, that grid, to cut pieces of vinyl about 8.5 by 9 inches or a little bigger than your design's layers. If the cut vinyl keeps curling, flatten them out under a stack of books for an hour or so. Take one sheet of vinyl and one 8.5 by 11-inch sheet of 65-pound cardstock. I'm using white for the layers so the lights show through well. Place the cardstock face down on your clean work surface. Peel back about 1 inch of the vinyl's backing from one end. Fold it down using the grid lines as your guide. And don't worry about fingerprints. This vinyl will be on the cardstock's back and no one will see them. Make sure the edges line up and then apply the vinyl's exposed end to one edge of the cardstock. Don't let it stick until you're sure of the placement. Use the extra large scraper to adhere the vinyl well so it won't move. Reach one hand under the vinyl sheet and between it and the cardstock. Pull a small section of the backing away from the edge that you just secured. With your other hand, use the scraper to press the vinyl down onto the cardstock in small sections. Peel the backing off from underneath as you go. Work slowly and make sure to smooth out any wrinkles before peeling off more backing. When you're finished, cut off any excess vinyl from around the cardstock's edges. The 4 middle layers are the most intricate, so I recommend using vinyl on the back of each one. Step 4. Cut your lantern layers. Back in Cricut Design Space on the Prepare screen, you should have 7 mats if you're using the same color setup as me. I'm going to use 8.5 inch by 11 inch paper for everything other than the red glitter, so I'll change my material size for the other mats. And actually, we can save some glitter cardstock by dragging the bird silhouettes into the negative space inside the frame. I love doing this. Click back on the first mat and then click Continue in the lower right corner. On the Make screen, check if your first mat needs plain or vinyl back cardstock. I use the medium cardstock setting with more pressure for both, but remember that all machines are different, so you may need to adjust your settings. Mine is plain cardstock, so I'll put a piece face up on a green standard grip machine mat, and use a brayer to make sure it's really well adhered for the best cuts. Now check that your fine point blade is clean and in the clamp, because any dust or paper fibers can mess up your cuts. Then load the mat into your machine and press the flashing button or the go button to begin. When the cut is finished, unload the mat, flip it over onto your work surface, and roll the mat back to release the cardstock. This helps prevent the material from curling and ripping. Cut the next few mats using plain white cardstock for the frame pieces. These will take a while to cut because the machine will make small dash cut lines for the lines that will crease later on. When it's time for an intricate layer, take a moment to clean your blade. My favorite quick way is to poke the blade into a ball of aluminum foil several times to knock any fibers or glitter or adhesive off. Or you can use rubbing alcohol and a lint-free cloth like a little prep pad. Be careful though, because the blade is sharp. For the best results, clean the blade between each intricate cut layer and after cutting glittery materials, because that can really stick to the blade and housing. And be sure to place the prepared sheet vinyl side down on your green standard grip mat. And do your best to position any wrinkles in the vinyl outside of where the design will cut. Adhere it with a brayer and then load and begin cutting the mat. But before unloading your mat, check to see if the cut went all the way through by gently lifting a corner of the material. If it didn't go all the way through, press the go button for another pass. The cuts will be made in the exact same spots and can really save your layer if some of the original cuts were a little too shallow. When the cuts are complete, unload your mat, flip your mat over onto your work surface, and roll it back to release the reinforced cardstock. You can slide your spatula gently under the intricate pieces to remove them, but the vinyl on the back will help prevent them from tearing. If you do have any trouble with any of your cuts, check out my Cricut tips and tricks for cleaner cuts at jennifermaker.com/cleaner-cuts. After removing your cut layers from the mat, you may need to peel away the excess materials around the cut area and use a weeding tool to poke out the inner pieces, as the vinyl will make the pieces stick in place. Cut the rest of the reinforced cardstock mats the same way. If you're cutting the front piece or birds from glitter cardstock, set the material to glitter cardstock with more pressure. Place your glitter cardstock face up on a green standard grip machine mat and use the same steps to load, cut, and remove the pieces. Here are what my cut pieces look like. Step 5. Assemble your lantern base and layers. Here are the pieces for the base. Place a side piece face up with a pointed edge to the right. Align your scraper along the first dashed cut or score line on the right and fold the small section up. Keep moving to the left, supporting and folding the other creases the same way so they start curling into a tube. Run your scraper along the folds to sharpen them. Then prepare the other side section the same way. Place the large base so the creases run vertically, and you can see that it has the same set of creases on either end. One side at a time, support the dash cut lines with your scraper to get the creases started, then run your scraper along them to sharpen the creases. They should all fold the same way so the creased sections start rolling in toward each other. Starting on one side of the base, add glue to the back of the long tab at the side. Roll it toward the middle and align it on the base. Make sure the edges are flush and the tab touches the side wall. Gently put your fingers in the sides to press the ends of the tab in place, then press down along the top edge so the glue bonds well. It's harder to tell if the tab is secure further in, but you can poke your tweezers or the narrow end of your spatula in from each end to carefully adhere the tab. Hold the wall and tab in place for about 30 seconds so the glue is completely set. It needs to be very secure. Use the same process to create and secure the other long wall. Then grab one of the small pieces. Roll it up and glue its bottom tabs together to make a rectangular tube. Repeat to make the other short wall. Each small wall piece will attach to the base with its glued seam at the bottom and the angles pointing in, so check which piece goes on either side. Put some glue on the bottom of a small side piece. The inner corners of the long sides will go inside the small pieces, so you might need to move them a little out of the way. Then press a small side in place so the outer joints are flush. Once the bottom is dry, pull the small side piece back a bit and add dots of glue to the top of the long sides where they overlap. Then push the small wall back in place and press down on the glued areas until they dry. Repeat with a second short side piece to complete the base. Now lay out the side frames and inner layers. If you're adding color to the birds like me, put a little glue on each glitter shape's back, avoiding the cutouts. Then secure them to the matching silhouettes on the front of layer 1. Take a side piece frame and use your scraper to help fold and crease the long tabs. Then repeat on the other side frame piece. They're exactly the same, so don't worry about mixing them up. Make sure your layers are correctly oriented with layer 1, the one with the birds, on top. The heart gets smaller the further you go back, so that's the one to check that they're in order. It's easier to assemble one side at a time, so take a frame side piece and layer 1. Make sure the folded tabs on the frame face toward the layer. Each layer has tabs on the side that match the slits on the frame pieces. Gently put the first layer's bottom tab into the lower slot on the frame. Then put the top tab into the upper slot. They're a tight fit to make the lantern sturdy, so tweezers can help pull the tabs through. Once both tabs are through, gently pull them down to lock them into place. You can tell when the bottoms are flush. Carefully let the first layer fall out of the way so you can see the next set of slots. Add layer 2 using the same steps. It can help to reach through the heart to maneuver the tabs. Just be very careful that you don't bend or rip the delicate elements. The vinyl reinforcement helps here a lot. Add the third and fourth layers the same way. Then take the other side frame piece and make sure the folded tabs face the lantern layers. Starting with layer 1, use the same process to put the tabs through the correct slots and lock them in place. The second side takes some patience and gentle maneuvering, so take your time to avoid damaging the paper, especially the tabs or delicate design elements. Once the last layer is in place, you can see how it looks so far in the base. Step 6. Add the lights to the back layer. We need to add the lights to the back layer before putting it in place, so gather your cardstock layer, fairy lights, and glue dots. Unwind the fairy lights and make sure they work before you use them. Some kinds have a little battery protector that you might have to remove first. Now it's important that the switch is accessible and that you can change the batteries. So we'll add glue dots to the side without screws. We'll be using these glue dots a lot and they're super sticky. The easiest way to manage them is to rip a section of backing paper off with a dot and use the paper to press the adhesive in place and then peel the paper away. Then adhere the battery pack about 1/2 inch in from the cardstock's left side with the switch right at the bottom edge so you can turn them on and off. Use a few glue dots to secure the wire without lights right by the battery pack, but don't adhere anything to the pack so it's easier to access the batteries to swap them later on. Now we want to light up the sides, top, and bottom of the panel without interfering with the final assembly. So the 1/2 inch on either side where the frames will be glued must remain clear. Also, keeping the lights away from the middle will create a softer glow, so watch my placement first. The thin wire is too tiny to adhere the glue dots, so stick them to the first light and then press it in place right near the coiled section. Start feeding the lights across the bottom and up the right side, adhering every other light. Remember, leave the 1/2 inch along the right side clear to add the frames tab later. Keep lighting up the top, staying about the same distance from the upper edge, then continue down the left side. When you get to the battery pack, try to feed a light or two over it so there isn't a dark spot, but don't adhere them to the plastic so they don't interfere with changing the batteries. You might have to secure pieces of the wire nearby and make sure the lights don't stick up too much. Use the rest of the lights to weave back and forth across the bottom section. You don't want any of the lights or wire to be visible through the heart cutouts, so hold the rest of the assembled lantern in place against the back piece and look down at everything to check. If anything doesn't look right, adjust it now. Also, if any lights or wire sections stick up, try to tack them down with more glue dots because there's only about 3/8 of an inch clearance before the next layer. Turn on your light one more time to make sure everything looks good. Step 7, finish the lantern assembly. Add glue to the back of the lantern side frame tab. Place the back in position, making sure the edges align and the lights stay in place. You can flatten the layers and press against the glued areas to make sure they adhere well. Then hold up the back piece and add glue to the other side's tab. Lower the back layer in place and make sure the edges line up without disturbing the lights or the battery pack. You can't really flatten this side as well, so sneak your fingers in from the sides to help press the layers in place while the glue dries. Once the back is completely dry, flip the lantern over and glue the front frame piece to the side tabs using the same process. Remember, make sure the edges line up. Slide the assembled layers into the base and your lantern is complete. Step 8, show it off. Your 3D lantern is ready for display. Isn't it awesome? All right, to turn on the lights, take the lantern out of the base and flip the switch at the bottom. Then replace the lantern in its base. If you need to replace the batteries, take the lantern out of the base and gently lift the back layer. Carefully pry up the battery pack. Once you've replaced the batteries, sneak the pack back in place and gently press down to re-adhere the glue dots. Isn't the final result so pretty? And I love that because it's a light and not in a wall frame. You can move this little lantern around wherever you like. If you want to send one of these to a friend or family member, I think it would be best to take the layers out of the base and then let them collapse to one side or the other so they can't be easily crushed. Then carefully place the layers and base in a shipping box with some protection. The recipient can pop the layers back in very easily. I'm always so impressed by what a Cricut can cut. This would have taken ages to cut by hand. It did take some time to come up with a concept, design the SVGs, and test it to get everything perfect, but that's not magic. And those are totally skills you can learn, of course. If you need any help using Cricut Design Space, I've got you covered with a free mini course I call Cricut Kickoff. You can sign up totally free over at cricutkickoff.com. If you love this lantern but wish there was a different design inside the frame, it is possible to customize or even entirely create your own design using my own template and the individual birds, branches, a tree trunk with initials, or really anything else you want. I'm making my personal design templates available through a special program called Jennifer Maker Advance. I may or may not be accepting new members into this program at the time you watch this, but if you're interested, go to jennifermaker.com/advance to learn more and get on the waiting list. I hope you found this workshop helpful and that you'll make your own paper lantern. Please let me know if you have any questions. I'm always happy to help. Until next time, this is Jennifer Maker reminding you to craft a life you love.